the absolute greatest gift that I've had in my life has been being a mother and now a grandmother. And so around this Mother's Day, it is a beautiful time, but yet also a sad time for me to reflect on the time when I couldn't be a mother, and then the time when I lost my mother, and then the time when I lost my only son. So Mother's Day is very emotional for me, and my daughters know it. One year, this is absolutely my favorite Mother's Day, they made an Arabian tent. We were living on St. Simon's Island, and they went out to the beach and arranged an Arabian tent, put carpets and cushions on the ground. We had an argili, we had trays of fresh fruit and champagne and charcuterie. Oh my gosh, they had decked it out for me. And this was during the pandemic. That was Mother's Day during the pandemic. So I will never forget that Mother's Day and the feeling of appreciation. Now, I don't know how many of you feel that appreciation from your children on a regular basis. I think there's like this time out period during teenage years, but I've learned to really recognize, identify, appreciate those moments of implied appreciation, however few they might be, and really soak them up. I want to talk this around this Mother's Day and celebration of mothers and children. And as a physician, now 30 years in practice, actually, if you count the years before I went to medical school doing scientific research and volunteering and emergency medicine squad and all those things, really 4 decades of medicine. And what I see, especially now coming back into clinical practice after my hiatus or retirement or whatever you want to call it. So, post pandemic medicine is very, very different. There are things to consider that we never had to consider before. Reactivation of mono, Epstein-Barr virus, CMV, autoimmune conditions, thyroiditis, cardiovascular issues that are heightened on my areas of awareness that weren't there before. And that's in my adult population. Now, children are struggling too, more and more with attention deficit issues, autoimmune issues, and exacerbation of environmental toxins affecting their ability to thrive, including delays in development and maturity. So, I wanted to bring on a special guest and a dear friend of mine that is a holistic expert in this field and is just an outstanding person. So whether you are raising children now, have raised them, or have nieces, nephews, cousins, people you mentor in the younger age groups, I want you to hear this because the points that we make in this podcast are about legacy, are about generational health, are about empowerment. So I know you'll enjoy this episode. Here we go. I want to introduce you to Dr. Elisa Song. Well, welcome, Melissa, to the Girlfriend Doctor Show. It is awesome to have you here and to have conversations with you, especially as we surround ourselves with the emotions and feelings around Mother's Day. And I don't know about you, but like there's been like guilt of being a mother. Called my first daughter practice and all this other good stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I wanted to bring you to my audience as an expert in pediatrics and pediatric health for the legacy that it makes in our life. This is our future generation, our future leaders. So there are so
Yeah.
many issues that are coming up, and I wanted you to, highlight your expertise in this area.
Well, thanks for having me. And I feel, as moms, as grandparents, this is so important because our kids' futures, if we take a step back, our children are not moving towards a thriving future like we all want for our kids and for our grandkids. So I'm hoping that, with just really just a little bit more know-how on some of the foundations for what it takes for kids to thrive today, that we can really move this trajectory of where kids are heading.
and the concept of what is touted as normal versus optimal. And isn't it
Yep.
true that the American Academy of Pediatrics delayed maturity levels? I know for my granddaughter, it said, oh, well, we're not using delayed walking until they're 18 months old now, or something like
Yeah,
that.
it's so interesting because, as we've seen different, milestone definitions changing, what's expected to be normal. I think that, we as a society have really um, shifted our views on what we consider normal for kids. And now it's really, with nearly 1 in 2 kids right now diagnosed with some sort of a chronic health concern, and, many more kids who they don't necessarily have a diagnosis, but they're just not thriving in the way that they could. We've sort of normalized that, oh, kids should have kind of rough eczema skin. That's, oh, a little eczema as a baby, that's fine. Oh, your baby's colicky, it has some reflux. Yeah, that's pretty normal for kids. Or, oh, they're having some sensory issues, wiggling in their seats, can't pay attention. That's totally normal. And even our kids, as when I talk to teenagers, they've normalized that anxiety should be a part of growing up. Oh, my friends are on, this medication. Of course, yeah. I mean, of course I'm going to be at some point. Don't we all have anxiety or, ADHD or whatever it is? And so, what I want to get back to is the fact that yes, there are health concerns and yes, there are things that need to be addressed. But if we really get at some of the underlying root causes, if we understand kids developing gut brain connections, gut immune system connections, all of this quote new normal, it doesn't have to be normal. We can go back to, where kids really, hardly a kid needed an EpiPen, for anaphylactic food allergies, which are on the rise. There it was a rare child who needed asthma inhalers or ER visits, and so the list goes on and on. And we as parents and grandparents now need to really not accept that this has to be the norm for our kids. There can be another way for kids to really live and thrive today.
Oh, I so agree. And it's very interesting because way back when Ava was in second grade, she was in second grade, so she was 7. So almost 10 years ago, 9, 10 years ago now, I would go and have lunch with her. And I remember sitting at the lunch table looking at the lunch and like, there's nothing keto green about this lunch. There's nothing whole
Yeah.
real food. It's all processed, it's full of sugar. And 8 of the 16 kids at the table got up. And I was like, where are you guys going? Like, we're going to get our good behavior meds.
Oh gosh.
And
Yeah.
like they were all on ADD meds.
Yeah.
And I was like, gosh, it's just their lunch
Yeah.
that's making them not pay attention the rest of the day and exhausted and brain fog and fidgety. I mean, this is a horrible lunch. I mean, cupcakes were the dessert, and
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
was that was eye-opening to me.
And the school meal programs really aren't much better. I mean, there are some organizations now that are trying to help schools, grow gardens and understand what real food is. But through the variety of different school breakfast, school lunch programs, I think that if educators and school policymakers and if parents truly understood the impact that food can have on their kids' brains and behavior on a negative front, but also on a positive front, I think we would have a very different school meal program. And, it's really, when we know that at least 1 in 3 kids who have attention and behavior problems, if we simply just took out the artificial dyes and the preservatives, their behaviors and attention would improve. I mean, 1 in 3. And that seems like that
Wow.
should be a relatively easy fix. And yet there's this back and forth of, well, is the data really there? Do we have to, why is the onus on the parent or the child to have to prove that this is something that should happen in our school lunch program? Just get rid of the fake stuff and so many other things, the anxiety, the behaviors, the eczema, the asthma, even for teenagers, their skin, their acne, all of that is going to improve. And the foundation really is how those foods impact the gut microbiome and the gut brain connection, the gut skin connection, gut immune system connection. But for so many parents, the concern is, gosh, they're getting sick over and over again and missing so much school, or, oh my gosh, they're sent to the principal's office again, or, they're not able to manage at home or at school. They're just filled with so many anxieties. And food really is that powerful, as you know. I mean, as listeners know, but we have to frame it in a way that makes it doable and desirable
Oh,
for
yeah.
parents and for children too, because it's a shift in how we're thinking about eating.
Oh, absolutely. And it reminds me of a client who was in my Magic Menopause program a few years ago, maybe 7 years ago now. And she followed my program and did amazing. And she was a principal of a K through 12 school in Latin America and Colombia. And so she was a principal. So she said she took out all the sodas, made
Yeah.
water and, sparkling water and green drink dispensaries instead. And the healthy snacks she put in there, she changed to a good degree, had better options for school lunches, and the teachers were happier because the kids were
Oh yeah.
happier.
Yep.
And she said it was within a month there was a significant difference
Yeah.
in her school. And
I mean,
I love
you know,
powerful women like that that make
I
the
love it. I
initiative.
mean, because that's where, if you really, when we're trying to change policies for school lunches, it can be really, really challenging because you have not just the teacher who may want to really participate in this, but then you have to go to the principal and then to the school board and then to whoever is contracting with the school vendors. So it's amazing when someone who has that power can really, take charge. And sometimes the differences are, I mean, literally, it can be a matter of days for some kids. I mean, I have this one kiddo who, he came to me tons of sensory behavioral issues starting in preschool. And, he was seeing occupational therapy and, getting into fights with the kids on his soccer team. And, his preschool teachers were really concerned about him. And, for the mom, um, I mean, all of this was concerning, but one of the hardest things was because he was so sensory, he just did not feel comfortable in his own skin. He just didn't want his mom to hug him. Right? I mean, he would just kind of, like, shrink away from her touch, and anytime she went to kiss him, he would, like, wipe it away, and, I mean, how heartbreaking, right?
Yes.
And
Yeah.
so when we met, I mean, we discussed a lot of things, but I said, "Look, let's just do one thing, one step in this next, couple of weeks before we meet again." And the one thing we did was take out, the Gatorade, with the neon blue Gatorade, and we swapped it for coconut water and other hydration drinks. He really liked, Takis, these red dye 40 MSG filled, tortilla chips. Terrible.
It's a
So
very popular Texas one.
very popular. So, in California, my kids, right? I mean, all their friends love the Takis. So, but I didn't just say take it out. I said, let's find a suitable replacement. So I said, okay, well, Trader Joe's has their rolled corn tortilla chips. Siete has their Fuego chips. So we made these little swaps. I mean, Skittles, we found a replacement, right? And so we just swapped out the artificial dyes and the preservatives. 2 weeks later, mom sends me a message and she's like, you will not believe the difference. He is so much more calm in his body. The teachers are noticing. And for the first time in forever that she could remember, he let her hug him, and he didn't wipe off her kiss. I mean, that was
Aw, that is
golden for the
beautiful.
mom, right? And it was, I mean, less than 2 weeks. So sometimes the changes can be really that fast. And so, you know, why not? Why not try that and do that? And then when we notice that, let's vote with our dollars. Let's vote, vote, really on that more consumer and public level to change, because this really is going to make such a difference, not just for the immediate behaviors, but for the long term brain health of your kids. On the opposite side, we know. That ultra processed foods are contributing to the rise in dementia and cognitive decline in the elderly, and we can see the, brain changes in kids when they eat a diet largely of ultra processed food. So I think that if parents knew that, it would be an easy choice. If kids knew that, I mean, kids can be their own best advocates if they understand and it's relevant for them.
Ah, so true. And I think, especially looking at today in our medical field, and, like we're supposed to be the leaders in medicine, interventional medicine, et cetera. And yet now the statistics are that 1 in 5 kids have eczema, one
Yeah,
in 10 has asthma, ADHD, or anxiety. And that's huge. Those are huge numbers. Now,
huge numbers.
Alyssa, you address the gut microbiome, and I want you to talk about why that's so important in empowering kids and parents in this area. How is, like, how, for neurologic conditions, for these skin conditions, like, your approach is gut first.
Yeah. Yeah. It's gut first, microbiome first. And many people have heard that Hippocrates, the founder of modern medicine, is credited with saying that all disease starts in the gut. And I mean, we really have to flip that too. I'm all about, we can get the data out there. Some of the data is scary, right? Some of it's like, oh my gosh, why I wish I'd known that. And I do that too. I mean, I go back in time in my mind as a parent, I'm like, oh, why didn't I know this, with Kenzie and Bodhi? But we can't go back in time. What we can do is know the facts now, and then we have to flip it and say, "Okay, well, my kid's eczema, my kid's, ADHD, maybe that stemmed from the antibiotics they received when they were little." But now we also know all health starts in the gut. So how do we then take that gut first microbiome centric approach to help our kids thrive and move beyond that, right? We know we can restore a disrupted gut microbiome at any point. The sooner we know, the easier it is. So, now, I mean, that's why my mission now is just to have every parent and practitioner be aware of this. And so, we're talking about ADHD or anxiety. There's this intimate connection between the gut and the brain. And what many parents and kids, they have this kind of wide-eyed aha moment when I tell them that, at least probably 80 to 90% of the serotonin in our bodies that helps us stay calm, manage our worries, helps us with sleep, is made by our gut microbiome if it's a healthy gut microbiome. Maybe 50% of the dopamine, which is our attention, focus, reward, stay motivated neurotransmitter, is made by our gut microbiome if it's a healthy gut microbiome, right? And so if we can um, establish a vibrant, resilient gut microbiome, that is going to optimize then the levels of all of these quote brain chemicals that keep your brain healthy and happy. And same thing with our, let's say eczema, which is so common for children and for older kids. I mean, they have this sort of allergic march where maybe as babies they start with eczema and then they get the wheezing and the asthma. And then when, in their toddler years, and then when they're older in their elementary school years, they develop the hay fever and the allergies. And so this march doesn't have to progress, but we know that for infants, as their gut microbiome is developing and their immune system is now talking to their gut microbiome, in fact, 80% of our immune system is in our gut microbiome. Disruptions to that, like antibiotics or antacid medications early on in life, especially when they're babies, can sometimes double the risk of these allergic diseases from happening by the time they're 4. And so if your kids already have the eczema, the allergies, the, whatever it is, that's a signal. Okay, let's go back to the gut. Maybe they don't have any constipation or diarrhea. That's okay. We still want to look at their gut microbiome because that's where we can move the needle on not just reducing their symptoms of anxiety or ADHD or allergies or eczema, but getting to the root underlying imbalance, that gut microbiome disruption, we manage that, and all of these other things can fall into place. Because we know that kids with eczema, they're more at risk for anxiety and ADHD. Kids with ADHD often have anxiety and they often have, atopy, this eczema, asthma. It's all interconnected. So, we move the needle on one thing. I mean, in my book, I call it the butterfly effect, right? People there's this was a Professor Lorenz back in the 20th century where he was looking at weather patterns, and he is the one who said, could the flap of a butterfly's wings in Texas set off a tornado in China, right? Or maybe it was Brazil, but really that little tiny shift could have these profound effects. And same thing with your microbiome. A small shift in optimizing your gut microbiome has these ripple effects, I mean, through your entire body and brain.
Oh yeah, no, and I love that. I love bringing up the butterfly effect. And also, there's a saying that we learned at Emory and in our surgical gynecology rotations, and it's the eyes don't see what the mind don't know. Right? The eyes don't see what the mind don't know. And when we not aware of it, we really don't see that connection. But once we make that connection, we see it everywhere. And I
Yes.
have to tell you, the brainwashing of children is starting, it starts on TV commercials,
Oh,
it
yeah.
starts on TV
Yeah.
shows, it starts in social media. And it was really uh, loud and clear when my firstborn daughter, Amanda, was only 6 years old. And she came to me and she said, Mom, I need DETROLLA. And that's Detrol LA, which is a prescription I would prescribe my, patients with
Oh
bladder
my gosh.
urgency. She's
Wow.
like, I just got to run to the bathroom all the time. And, this, and I was like, oh my God, she was just brainwashed to think she
Yes.
needed a drug at 6 years old.
Yes.
And I
Yeah.
was like, oh, well, stopping the caffeine, stopping the sweet tea, stopping the artificial sweeteners. And then I saw one day Amanda came home from school and it was Valentine's Day and she was bouncing off the walls. I mean, literally
Yeah.
bouncing off the walls.
Yeah. You're like, "Oh my gosh, is this my child?"
Is this
Right.
right? What is possessed my child, right? I'm like, what do we need to do here? And it was because she had red lollipops and red
Yeah.
candies for Valentine's Day, and the red dye is specifically neurotoxic, but also to the gut. So I'd
Yes.
love you to talk about first steps. Like now we see this, there's a connection here. Our
Yeah.
gut, our mood, our skin, our energy levels, our ability to concentrate, and the whole anxiety piece, which is
Yeah.
very, very, and depression, very, very prevalent among our teens.
Yeah. Well, I would say the first most important step for most of us is to shift our mindset. Right? Because, what I hear from a lot of parents or grandparents is, well, I mean, we should just let them be kids. I mean, why deprive them? And a lot of parents who embark on this road start to feel maybe lonely at times because they feel like, okay, well, everyone else is eating that junk and they have their friends or their sisters or their mom saying, you're depriving Johnny. It's just not fair. You're depriving him of his childhood. And so I really want that mindset shift to occur that, in choosing a diet and lifestyle that is nourishing your child's brain and their microbiome and helping them thrive, that's not deprivation. Right? So we really have to kind of go internally a little bit and be okay with that. And also, for our kids too, right? And recognize that it's not an all or nothing. I'm not saying that, when you go to the birthday party, that you should say, "Oh my gosh, don't touch the cake, it's poison." Because, there are going to be times where we have those exposures to the neon frosted blue cupcake, right? And if we build microbiome resilience, their microbiomes in the brains can bounce right back. It's just that we don't want to make that an everyday thing. A resilient microbiome is one that is able to bounce back and return to a healthy state no matter what happens. Same thing with your immune system, right? A resilient immune system means it's not that you're living in a bubble and trying to never ever get your kids sick. It means that we have the confidence and the knowledge that when our kids do get sick, they have a resilient immune system, they can get sick and then they bounce right back to being healthy, right? And so we want that state for our microbiome. And part of that means also educating our kids and letting them know, just like you said with the brainwashing, right? We figure out what their goals are. Is it their skin? Is it their friendships? Is it running super fast down the soccer field? Whatever it is, because you can guarantee you can tie that back to the microbiome, right? And then we let them know, look, this is all about making sure that you have the power over what you want to eat and how you want to live. Because all of that packaging and that marketing and the red dyes and the ultra processed foods with, the too much added sugars, and the food scientists, or these mad scientists behind the scenes that are working to make sure that the mouth feel of that food, and the way that it's stimulating your taste buds is telling your brain that you want more and more and more. So when we say, "Oh, I just want it because I love it," it's because we are now addicted to it. Those food scientists have made sure that we are no longer in control over what our taste buds crave. And so when you tell kids and teens that, especially teens, right? Because what do they want? They want independence. They want control,
Right. They want to
right?
rebel a little bit.
That's right. Well, who are they letting have control then? Is it going to be the food scientists, or are they going to take back that control and really understand what it means to have that healthy microbiome? And I will say, when we're thinking about like a keto-green approach, or really trying to have that healthful lifestyle that is going to nourish their microbiome too, one of the easiest things to start with for some families is actually thinking about the swaps that we can make, because it might be a harder sell to, give your child a bowl full of greens and these amazing fiber-filled phytonutrients, fruits and vegetables and nuts and seeds and all of that. If your kids are into that, amazing, right? Because we can always up level our, phytonutrient intake.
Totally.
But
Yeah,
right? But if your kids are at the point now where, they have a handful of vegetables, maybe, right? 1 in 2 kids on any given day doesn't have any vegetables, right? So don't beat yourself up if your kids aren't huge vegetable eaters just yet. But if you're buying, packaged foods, which I buy packaged foods, I go to Trader Joe's, Whole Foods, you gotta learn how to read packages in a really savvy way, in a way that for kids, you can teach them how to be gut heroes, how to be heroes to their microbiome. And with that, I teach kids and parents how to read the labels and really be detectives in assessing which labels you're just gonna put right back. If you right now, if you go online, you can Google Takis, right? And the food label, you will see things that are major, major disruptors for gut microbiome. Anything that says artificial, the colors, like the red dye you said, they're especially neurotoxic, but it's been shown that they can create imbalance in the gut microbiome, something called gut dysbiosis. There are other food additives that I especially look for. They're called emulsifiers that keep our food together from becoming like a goopy mess in the package. So these are shown to directly cause something called leaky gut, and have been linked with the rise in autoimmunity in certain countries. So you're not going to see emulsifiers on it, but what you will see are things like carrageenan, or mono and diglycerides, or carboxymethylcellulose. They're hard to learn at first, but once you know what to look for, you'll be like, oh, there are the mono, and diglycerides right in this, ice cream that says it's made with natural flavors. Okay, well, let's put that back and get the ice cream that doesn't have that. That's literally just, you know, dairy and sugar and maybe some fruit, right? So, we can have packaged foods, but if we do it in a way that they're minimally processed foods, without these microbiome disruptors, that's going to go a long way in helping your kids in their teenage years, in their college years, in their young adult years when they're shopping for themselves, know how to maintain a microbiome and a brain and an immune system friendly way of living.
I want to touch on that because been a huge shift. And since we're on ice cream, I grew up in Northeast Pennsylvania. I used to go to the dairy farm, eat the ice cream. You have to eat it really quick when you're sitting outside because it melts.
Oh, yeah.
And we went to a new ice cream store in St. Simon's a few years back, and I can't do dairy, so my daughter's ice cream wasn't melting. And I was like, "Can you show me the ingredients in there?" And they
You're like,
they couldn't.
"Hmm."
But it was like, I'm sure it had a lot of carrageenan, right? And
That's
that's
right,
really
that's right.
from like, again, one of my pulp mill friends, like the pine pulp mills, said, oh, they using that to create that smoothness and that consistency and
That's
that
right.
stain. It's not melting, and you're just getting these, you know, whatever they are in your system. And I was like, whoa, that's not. natural. Let's go to the grocery store and find something
That's
without it.
right.
And we
That's right.
couldn't at that point. So so really, like, I love your point on reading labels. And I want to shift just briefly to talk about gluten and
Yes.
gluten as a factor in gut dysbiosis, in neurotoxicity, and what you're seeing and how you're addressing that with patients.
Yeah. So, I love the work of Dr. Alessio Fasano, who is one of our gluten celiac experts, and he's a pediatric gastroenterologist. So, a lot of pediatric data, and what he's found really, which is startling, is that gluten, even in patients who don't have celiac disease. Right. These are, patients who um, aren't diagnosed with any sort of gluten intolerance or gluten allergy or anything like that. But gluten directly harms the intestinal lining. It directly triggers something called zonulin release, which is a marker for leaky gut. And when we have a leaky gut, that is one of the underpinning factors for a whole host of chronic diseases in children and adults. And so gluten can be highly inflammatory. And so the way I look at it, if you have a chronic condition going on, an inflammatory condition, I just want to kind of relieve the burden off your child's immune system, right? We
Mhm.
just want your child's immune system, gut, brain to have the best chance at healing. So, in the healing process, I do think in that moment, yes, it's really important to eliminate the gluten because we want to heal your child's leaky gut. We want to reduce the inflammation um, for certain children and for adults too. The proteins found in gluten and even casein from dairy and soy proteins can get converted into these opioid like compounds that are called gliadomorphins, casomorphins, soy morphins. And so, in the context of a leaky gut, these morphine like compounds from these foods get absorbed through the holes, the leaks in your intestinal lining, and can go directly to the brain and cause your kids to act literally like they're drugged, right? I've had some kids where, after gluten or dairy, I have this one kiddo who it was so clear after dairy, she literally would start kind of walking like she was drunk. I mean, tripping, yeah, over her feet, just so spacey. And and so the mom had taken out dairy from her diet. The dad didn't um wasn't quite
On
convinced,
board yet.
right?
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. So he did his own little experiments and every single time it was so clear after the dairy, I mean, literally this girl looked like she had neurologic issues, right?
Mm.
Until the dairy could wash out of her system. But that can happen with gluten and soy as well. So now what about, kids who aren't gluten intolerant? I mean, our household, my kids, I've done gluten testing, celiac testing on them, and they don't have any signs, but their body shows that they have some signs. Like my daughter has the chicken skin, right? It's called keratosis pilaris, and she now at 13, well, she's 14 now, but at 13, she noticed. I just made a comment because she didn't like the bumpy skin. I said, you know, it could be related to gluten. We don't have a lot of gluten in our home, but if you're up for it, we could do a trial. We'll just clear everything. We'll just make sure that we plan all of our meals, and when we go out to eat, that you can be gluten free for a couple of weeks. And she noticed her skin was so much smoother. And when she would go out with her friends, or we would go on vacation where maybe we were a little lighter on the gluten, her bumpy skin would get worse again. So she's now motivated, right? I mean, that's what we want. But it's really, I think, in the context of all of the disruptors to our gut microbiome today, that gluten is especially inflammatory because we have the gluten, we have the food additives in our ultra processed foods, we have too much added sugar, we have environmental toxins like our endocrine disruptors. These forever chemicals have been found to disrupt the gut microbiome, and we have psychological stress. So too much unmanageable psychological stress has also been found to trigger this zonulin release
Mhm.
and leaky gut. So just the way we're living in our modern world, it's causing our microbiomes to change, children and adults. I mean, we see this in adults too. We're losing very key probiotic species, especially this bifidobacteria that is so important in infants for developing a healthy immune response and a healthy immune response in adults. I mean, even in COVID, one of the researchers found that more severe COVID outcomes was related to having less bifidobacter in the adult
Wow.
microbiome. So, I think the more we can do to get in our microbiome champions, right? Just live in a way that, gut first, microbiome first, the rest will fall into place. And when we think about nurturing our microbiome, right, these trillions of microscopic, tiny little friends in our belly, it also helps kids because now it's not just about, "Ugh, because mom said it's healthy. It's about, you know what? These little guys, they are our best friends if we let them be. And so we are taking care of them so that they can take care of us. And it does make it easier to make these decisions.
I love that, and it just reminds me of the book, Horton Hears a Who
Yes.
by Dr.
Yeah.
Seuss,
Oh, I
which
love
is
that, yeah.
yeah, because it's this little no one can see it but Horton, and he hears
Yes,
it, and then again, what you don't the mind doesn't see, the eyes don't see what the mind don't know, but all of a sudden now you have this entire community that becomes accepted, etc. That Horton hears the Who. So that is
I
good
love that, I love
recommended
that.
reading next
Mhm.
to Dr. Elisa Song's book, Healthy Kids, Healthy Kids, Happy Kids.
Yep.
Healthy Kids, Happy Kids. I want you to tell us where we can get that book, Elisa.
Yeah. So, you can get Healthy Kids, Happy Kids, at pretty much any book retailer. I encourage you support your local bookstores, indie bookstores for sure. But you can find all the different ways to get it on my website. It's healthykidshappykids.com/book. But again, it's available everywhere.
Healthykidshappykids.com/book. Now, before I let you go, I do want to talk. You have a whole chapter on the vagus nerve, and this is so important right now.
Yeah.
The vagus nerve optimization. And can you touch on that? Explain why it's so important, and quick. Is there a quick exercise we can all learn to do and
Yes. Yeah.
teach?
So what's interesting is, we know through the past century, as children's microbiomes have been followed, as I've said, our microbiomes have changed, but also our children's vagus nerve functioning has changed, even from the late 1900s, which I mean, that sounds like forever ago, but it's just not too long ago. But we have these historical controls of children from this cardiologist in Germany who measured children's vagus nerve function by proxy by something called heart rate variability. And from, the late 1900s up till now, our children's heart rate variability, their vagus nerve function has worsened. So all of this is changing. And as I mentioned, the vagus nerve, as many listeners know, it's responsible. It's part of our autonomic nervous system called the parasympathetic nervous system, which is really important for the rest, digest state, for the healing, meditative, flow state. And it balances out the sympathetic nervous system, which is our fight or flight stress response. Now, we need both, right? Because stress is not bad in and of itself. It's just that we have too much chronic stress. Same thing as inflammation. Inflammation isn't bad just by itself. We need it to get over infections and to get over certain illnesses. But it's just that we have too many sources of chronic everyday inflammation. So our sympathetic nervous system gets way too much practice. Our parasympathetic doesn't get nearly enough. And if we can practice and engage your child's vagus nerve, improve their heart rate variability, what's fascinating is that activities that improve heart rate variability in children have been found to improve their gut microbiome diversity and function independent of diet.
Mm.
So if food is one of the more challenging things to do, we can teach our kids how to engage their vagus nerve. And I don't necessarily call it mindfulness or meditation because, for a lot of kids that just gets some eye rolls, right? Even for a lot of adults, right? It's kind of like I'll do it when I have time. But it's probably one of the most important prescriptions that we can give as physicians to our patients. And so, I call it vagus nerve work and I teach kids about why their vagus nerve is so important. And we know that a resilient vagus nerve will really correlates with a resilient microbiome and vice versa. They're so intimately connected because the gut communicates with the brain via the vagus nerve. What's fascinating is that maybe 80% of the communication is from the gut to our brain. So again, another testament to, okay, when we're having quote brain issues, where do we really need to look first, right? But, instead of, having separate exercises that kids should do throughout the day, which I list some examples. Yes, of course, I would love every family, at the end of the day to have a gratitude practice because that improves your vagus nerve
Mhm.
function. I would love at night, to maybe listen to an app or do, a sleep meditation because that improves your vagus nerve function. But the thing that we can do every day, all day long is breathe. I mean, we all breathe every single day. And if we learn to breathe in a way that really specifically engages our vagus nerve, your kids can do that anywhere, anytime. So it's not an add on, it's just do what you're doing already, but just do it in a way that serves your microbiome and your brain. And so, many people have heard of belly breathing or diaphragmatic breathing.
I'm doing it right
It's
now.
yep. It's a simple concept, but it's the thing that most people don't do because when we get
Right.
stressed, our shoulders come to our ears
Totally.
and we're breathing with the upper quarter or third of our lungs, these really shallow breaths. So if we teach kids to just keep their shoulders down, relax their shoulders, right? They can put one hand on their chest, one hand on their belly, because we want to keep our chest still as we're inhaling. As you're slowly inhaling, we imagine a balloon in our belly. And as we take a slow breath in, the balloon in our belly is expanding and inflating. Chest on our hand is staying still. And as we exhale slowly, the balloon in our belly is deflating. Again, and shoulders stay still. And we just teach them how to do this if they're frazzled before a test, if a friend has just said something not too kind to them, if they're worried about a soccer game, they just can do this belly breathing in and out and slow down and regulate and engage their vagus nerve, which then gets them ready for the next step. So I think that if oops, are you
Yes.
frozen? Okay, good. Um, I think that if kids can and parents can just learn to stop, do some belly breathing, and re-engage, that's gonna help their worries, first of all, but it will help their microbiomes, and it will help their gut-brain connection, which then helps their gut immune system connection, their gut hormone connection, all of that, the butterfly effect. So, if we just learn how to breathe in a way that creates microbiome magic, and we learn how to read food labels, right? I think those 2 things could change the trajectory of our kids' health.
I love that and making it really simple. As an obstetrician, we look at heart rate, fetal heart rate variability. That's
Yeah,
one of the things we monitor. And as long as the heart rate's beautifully variable, where we can just, take our time,
that's
the
right.
baby's good. But once we lose that heart rate variability, it's time to get that baby out. And
That's
then all of
right.
a sudden we stop checking. Like we stop checking and re-implementing checking the heart rate variability has been hugely beneficial. It's on my prescription for every patient is to monitor your heart rate variability, increase your heart rate variability. And it's been easy now with all these apps and smart devices that we can use to kind of
Yeah.
really what gets measured gets managed. And, and I appreciate that. Well, tell our audience, Dr. Elisa Song, what is in your book, Happy Kids, Healthy Kids?
So my book is really divided into 4 parts. The first part is really just educating kids, parents, practitioners on the gut, how the gut microbiome really is the foundation for resilience for your child. So there's a lot of data in there, a lot of the science and the research, because I want parents and practitioners to understand, okay, this is not just, a fad. This is something that we've known about since, the 1980s, right? And the science is just really now burgeoning with more and more,
The 80s were a great decade, a great
they were
decade.
a great decade. So, the first is that foundational, what we need to know about your child's gut microbiome and how it impacts their lifelong health. The second part of the book, well, and also it goes into, well, what happens when things go wrong? What is leaky gut? What is gut dysbiosis? The second part of the book is all about creating microbiome magic with 5 things we do every day, but now we're learning how to do them like a gut hero. So how do we nourish our microbiome? What kind of, microbiome champions do we want to get in? What do we want to keep out? How do we move our bodies? How do we sleep, hydrate? How do we breathe and engage our vagus nerve in a way that nourishes our microbiome? Part 3 is really focused on, okay, well, some kids have health concerns already. So what now? How do we recover your child's gut microbiome? How do we reset it when your child is already showing signs that their gut microbiome is disrupted? And then part 4 is one of my favorite parts as an integrated pediatrician. It empowers parents with tools using homeopathy, herbal medicine, essential oils, acupressure points on what to do when your kids get sick with a fever, a cold, a virus, whatever it is, um, so that we can avoid unnecessary trips to the doctor's office and we can avoid unnecessary antibiotics, so that your kids can get well and you don't have to feel worried in the middle of the night when your kids are sick. You just flip open the page. Oh, they're vomiting. Okay, this is what I need to do right now. It's like having that, that pediatrician in your ear saying, okay, it's okay. You got this. You can do this. And I also give tips though on when it really is important to go see the doctor because of course sometimes
Perfect.
we need to.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think, I thank you so much for your work. And right now I've got to order at least a dozen books for all these moms with new babies coming into the world and in my life and in my immediate,
Yeah.
um, family community. I'm excited about that. And I think it's just that empowerment piece, empowering kids, empowering parents, and understanding and just trying it because nothing in there is going to hurt. Question for you. Do you talk about testing, like how they can test or
I
recommendations for testing?
I
You know,
do, I do.
good.
Yeah, because, in my practice, I do, blood testing, stool testing, urine testing, when I have the opportunity. For a lot of parents out there, they don't necessarily have access to an integrative or functional medicine pediatrician. So, what I try to do is really, let's say, for nutrient deficiencies or signs of maybe having abnormal bacteria or yeast in your gut, I do have charts with clinical clues, these clues that can tell you, oh my gosh, my child is probably needs more zinc or probably needs more magnesium when
Nice.
you're not able to do the testing. But then, if you are able to do the testing, then I have a list of some of my foundational tests and also some of my recommended functional medicine tests, because more and more practitioners are opening their eyes and interested, and this also provides a roadmap for practitioners to know, what a pediatrician over the past 20 years of doing this in my practice, has really kind of honed down as the essentials when you're starting out.
Great. Yeah. And tell people where they can find you, where you're in practice, your social media.
Yeah. So I'm in practice in the San Francisco Bay Area. My practice is called Whole Family Wellness in Belmont. And online, you can find me on my website, healthykidshappykids.com. And I'm most active on Instagram, and that's healthykids_happykids.
I love it. I love it. You're a wealth of information. You do it with such heart, and it can feel so confident in you, especially as a parent when you're frazzled with a young child. And what do I do here? To have you whispering in our ear is a really nice thing. It's a really nice
Oh,
thing. So I
thank you,
thank you for
Anna.
all the work that you've put forth in the world. I wish you tremendous success with this book. For our audience, I encourage you to get copies of Dr. Elisa Song's book, Healthy Kids, Happy Kids. It makes a big difference. Healthy kids, help happy parents is the
Yes. Yes.
extension of that. And to share this episode with any parent or caregiver, this is important information. So I have loved this episode. I've taken it to heart and reminded that there's always one next right step we can take to improve the health of us and the health of future generations to come. So, thank you all for listening to the Girlfriend Doctor Show. Till next time, this is Dr. Anna Cabeca.